Welcome back to the Faith After Fire series on Rose, Rocks, Weeds, and Soil. If this is your first time joining us, let me tell you, this is a space where we as Gen tackle the messy, real-life challenges of today's culture and work on how to balance it all with wisdom, faith, and maybe a little bit of fun along the way. Last week, we kicked off the Red Flag Chronicles with Kanisha Marsh. She is the founder of Divine Connections, which is a Christian-based matchmaking service, not mating. When we learn how to spot toxic patterns early in dating. And let me tell you, the episode was really, really good. It was super fire, super hot. Today, we're going to dive a little bit deeper, though, and we're going to dig into love bombing and manipulation, which, these schemes can leave us feeling confused and drained and questioning our own self-worth. But here's the truth. You don't have to remain trapped in this cycle. With God's guidance and some practical tools from our incredible guest, licensed clinical social worker, Psalm McDaniels, we're going to learn how to identify these behaviors, set some firm boundaries, and protect our peace. Welcome, Psalm. And listen, y'all, this is the second time that I had to introduce her because something went wrong technically, but I'm going to say it again. Your name is everything. I was telling her parents, literally, they knew she was destined to bring healing and hope to the world. So, tell us a minute about yourself and, how long you've been practicing, pretty much helping to navigate relationships and set these boundaries.
Yeah, so I've been a therapist since 2016. I graduated from Bryn Mawr College, and I mainly work with Black and Brown women, and I help them create coping skills that feel good for them so that they can use them in their daily lives. I've been doing this for a while, and I really love the work that I'm doing.
I love that. I love that you're like Black and Brown. Let's go. Okay. Thank you for sharing. Before we dive into today's topic, I do want to quickly recap part one for anybody who might have missed it. We just talked about some of the more common red flags in relationships. One being inconsistencies and, not told, things that we overlook because we're so eager for companionship. We talked about unaligned behaviors that we excuse because we like to get physical. On attraction, no, it clouds our judgment sometimes, right? We talked about love bombing, which we are going to dig into, and excessive control that we kind of misinterpret as like a sign of care or love instead of manipulation. And one of the biggest takeaways we were talking about was that sometimes you're your own red flag, and that I was one of those red flags, but it's really just being ignorant. That's a red flag. Like you're ignoring the signs, right? And that is one thing when you recognize it, but then actually acting on it, right? So we talked about Proverbs 27:12, and it says, the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and they pay the penalty. Okay. So many of us see these warning signs, but we still hop on the struggle bus instead of walking away. Why do we do this? Tell us why.
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons. I think the love bombing can feel really good. I think especially when you come from a place where you haven't been receiving that affirmation in your life, or you're not giving yourself that affirmation, it can feel good to have somebody tell you, oh, I love these things about you, and on a consistent basis. The person can also be really, really convincing. They made it their whole job to make sure that they know how to manipulate somebody. They've done this for a long time. You're not the first person that they've probably done this to. So
say it again.
You are not the first person that they did that to. Okay, they're trying to convince you that it is their first time doing this, but they're good at this.
Exactly.
They're good at this. I think for a lot of us, we want to believe that it could work out, that things can be good for us, and so we are wanting this fairy tale, what it seems like a fairy tale, this person coming in and telling us all these positive things, and we want to believe that is for us.
Baby, say the word fairy tale. I mean, and that's exactly what happens. It makes so much sense because not only are we in this vulnerable place to want love and connection, and we end up entangled with narcissists and his reflection instead, right? But it's like we got to go deeper, because falling for love bombing and manipulation, everyone, I'm not going to say everyone, but if you experience it a little bit, you're probably going to fall for it, right? I mean, because it's just one of those things that's kind of unavoidable, you know? So what makes it hard to break free though? Like, like I know that I was love bombed. I know that I'm caught in this cycle. I know that, as soon as he does something, he's going to buy me a gift. Like, how do I say, okay, I'm not going to take his gift next time? How do I get out of that cycle?
That's hard. So even for me personally, I will say that sometimes I will tell my friends when I'm wanting to end something so that they can help me like stay accountable with it.
That reinforcement.
Reinforcements. You want to have your village around you. Make sure that there are people that are feeding into you and telling you like you do not deserve this. This is what you actually deserve. And finding a way to trust yourself that you know what you're experiencing. And sometimes what I like to do is tell clients to think about if it was a friend that was experiencing it and what they would tell their friend, or if it was a family member, what they would tell their family member. And as soon as I say that to them, they're like, oh, I would tell my family member they need to get out of that and they don't need to be around that no more. And I'm like, oh, okay. So how do we do that for you? I think it works better when you separate and you make it external, because then people are like, oh, wow. So, yeah.
I agree. I mean, because, it's scary how subtle the behaviors can be, right? And I agree with you. When you just kind of step out, disassociate, so to speak, right? Just kind of step out of your body and just kind of look at even yourself and that person. You're like, what am I doing? I see the movie playing over and over again. So, question, how does love bombing connect to the N word? No, we're not talking about that word. The narcissistic abuse. How does it connect?
Yeah. So people who are narcissists, and I will say that narcissism is a buzzword now, but
Yes.
narcissism you can be on a scale of narcissism and not be a narcissist. So somebody can have narcissistic traits, but not be a full-blown narcissist. So with love bombing, narcissists have found a way to get what their needs met. So they are finding a way to make sure their selfish needs are met by making you feel loved. So they are making you think that everything is going to work out okay, that this person thinks so highly of you when maybe they don't necessarily. It can be very confusing. They'll maybe start crossing your boundaries or trying to push the line, see how far you'll go with things. They might dismiss your feelings. They might have controlling tendencies. It could be really hard, especially if you're a person that maybe has anxiety and is fearful of setting boundaries with this person. But it can be hard to get out of those cycles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I've definitely been in those cycles. I mean, in a lot of relationships. It's embarrassing sometimes to say. I'm like, I've done that more than once.
A lot of us have.
Yeah. And so, when I asked the question, what are some of the early warning signs? I promise you, I think I could actually answer it, but I'm going to let you answer it as the therapist, right? What are the early warning signs of narcissism?
Yeah, so I would say, like I said earlier, if you think that this person is crossing your boundaries or they're not listening to your boundaries, that's a sign that they don't care for your well-being. So if they don't care for your well-being, then they can't care for you or care about you enough to be in a relationship. If they're dismissing your feelings and they're telling you that the way that you're feeling is wrong, they're trying to convince you that the way that you're thinking should be more like the way that they are thinking. Like, why aren't you okay with me doing this behavior? What's so wrong with me doing this? They're pushing you and trying to see if they can change your goalpost. So you want to be careful of that. You want to and you want to know how you're feeling inside of your body, because our bodies can sometimes be really good warning signs. If you feel jittery, if your hands are sweaty, if your stomach hurts, those are not butterflies. Those are a warning sign.
Yeah, and the nudge. We all get the nudge, right? And for those of us who need the biblical warning, Proverbs 26:24-26 says, enemies disguise themselves with their lips, but in their hearts they harbor deceit. Though their speech is charming, do not believe them. For 7 abominations, 7, y'all, fill their hearts. Deception may conceal their malice, but their wickedness will be exposed in the assembly. And when I tell you, King Solomon, the wisest king in the land, he ain't never lied, Psalm. He said what he said.
He did. Meant it. Okay.
When we realize that we're dealing with a narcissist, and again, or someone with narcissistic tendencies, right? Like the first step to me sounds like run, right? But what should we start setting boundaries? I mean, because again, there are people who say that narcissism is actually demonic influence and, the devil is attacking and, not something that you're actually born with, so to speak. I mean, I don't know. But, I've heard both. And so in that instance, if that were the case where you've been married to someone for 10, 20 years, and then all of a sudden they start developing or start exhibiting, I guess I should say, these narcissistic characteristics, what should your first step to? I mean, you're married, you got kids, like what do you do?
Yeah. So I think, and I'm wondering if this could be the case, but after that 10 years, I'm sure that they showed some signs before that. And if it's sudden, then it would make me question if there was something going on with them. But if it's like an ongoing thing where they are continuously showing these traits, I would say you do want to get out if you can get out. And if you feel like you don't want to get out right then, I would say the first step is to just start setting boundaries. If you don't like something that they're doing, tell them that you don't like they're doing it. Boundaries come with consequences. If you do this, I'm going to do that. If you start yelling at me on the phone, I'm going to hang up the phone. And then also keeping up with what you're saying that you're going to do. So making sure that you are doing what you're saying that you're going to do. So enforcing that boundary. And once you enforce those boundaries, they'll be like, okay, this person means business. So you definitely want to take the time and figure out how to set boundaries, confide in your friends, and see if that helps too.
And I guess the next thing is, so can you give us a little bit of an example from, your own practice? I know you can't tell us exactly who or what, but, someone that literally just didn't set the boundary and they ended up in this repeated toxic cycle.
Yeah. So I've seen with a lot of clients, especially clients that experience maybe child abuse or some sort of trauma in childhood, it can be really hard to kind of change their way of thinking coming into a relationship. So if they grew up thinking to themselves, I'm worthless, nobody wants me, I'm not lovable, these are all the narratives that are perfect for narcissistic abuse. So I've had some clients that have already, came into therapy with, having child abuse, and then trying to set boundaries in these relationships has been really hard because the way that they think about themselves, they don't think that they are worthy of better treatment. And I've seen through working with people that they were able to like increase their self-worth and to understand that they don't deserve the treatment that they're getting. And once they figure out that they deserve more, they're more likely to try to set those boundaries. But it can be really, really hard to convince yourself and to change the negative self-talk in order for you to put in action to feel better about the relationship.
I get that. I totally get that. Okay, so now that we've kind of discussed how love bombing keeps people trapped, let's delve into the heart of the issue that you just brought up, just the boundaries. And so difficult to recognize that we need to set them, even when we know that something just ain't right. It's like we get there and we're like, what is going on? We know we got to fix this, but we just kind of sit there. And so I'm going to go through this with the rows, the rocks, and the weeds. So for those of you that don't know, the rows, the rocks, and the weeds and the soil is parable of the sower. And at one point, I'm going to have to stop explaining it. So I'm not going to go into details, but the road is where, God is like, kind of giving us the word. And so it sits there. We don't accept it. We don't embrace it. And so when we start talking about boundaries and things, these are like the truths that we need to embrace. We know what's happening, right? But, in order to get to the healthy part of our relationship, we don't necessarily do it. So number one, the boundaries that we need to set are so important. They are necessary for our emotional and mental well-being. And so feel free to jump in if I say something wrong here. All right. So boundaries are needed for emotional and mental well-being, right? Otherwise we'll lose our mind. Number two, learning when to say yes and when to say no. And we kind of touched on this earlier before we had our technical difficulty. For me, the sidebar is real and important that I take it because my family history, I mean, I grew up in a house where I was spoiled. My parents never told me no. I mean, I would ask my mom, she'd say, ask your dad. I would ask my dad, he'd say, ask your mom. They literally played this ping pong game with me back and forth. No one ever saying no. I mean, and even if it took a week or 2 weeks or whatever it was an answer. It was never a straight up no, which leads me to number 3, setting the boundaries doesn't mean that you're being selfish, right? It doesn't mean that you're being mean or anything like that. But I'm growing in this area and it is really difficult for me because I do struggle with feeling like no is a bad word, even a selfish word. And it's not just my parents. I'll go a little bit deeper in the sense that I was molested as a child, right? And one of the things I remember my molester saying was like, don't say no, and, so it's not even just my parents, not saying no. It was like, you don't say no. And this is how it goes. Right. So, but let me be clear. And I'm not talking about serious situations as an adult, like assault or anything like that. I'm talking about everyday moments and loving relationships, right? Where I'm still learning that honoring my needs helps me show up as my best self. But it's just hard. It's hard for me to envision a version of myself where saying yes isn't who I am. I'm a yes person. Like I want to help by my nature. So, and again, this is not about me today. Today, why is it that when we get this information on the road, we know we got to set these boundaries? Why is it so difficult for me to internalize, and I shouldn't say me, everybody. Look, I'm trying to get a free session, y'all. It's like, why is it so hard?
It's really hard. Setting boundaries is really hard because, I think there are a lot of reasons why it's really hard to set those boundaries. I think it's hard to tell people no. There's a lot of guilt that can be associated with that. And I also want to say, just because you feel guilty does not mean that you are guilty. It just means that you feeling that you're having, and feelings can change.
That's good.
I also think that there's part of what's uncomfortable about setting boundaries is the anxiety of it all. Like whether that's the physical, the mental anxiety, the anticipation of what the boundary setting will be like. It can be very uncomfortable for a lot of people. And then the fear of the reaction of the other person. Will this person leave me? Will they stay there? What is my boundary valid? And if you've had previous experiences with boundaries where you've tried to set them and you've realized that it didn't go well, it could be really scary to try to set another boundary. If you've seen somebody try to set a boundary and you know that it didn't work well for them, it could be really hard or scary to consider setting a boundary. So I think all of those things go together and make it really, really hard to push past those things to be able to do what we need to do for ourselves.
And I think, of course, the first thing that you said just stuck with me. Like, just because you feel guilty doesn't mean that you are guilty. That is such a helpful perspective. It's like when we know that these truths are there, we have to internalize them, but then the obstacles still stand. Those are the rocks, right? And when we discuss the rocks in the road, it's like the big old boulders that, again, just knowing that you have to pick them out of the way. You got to move them, right? So, jump in, chime in if I'm saying something wrong here. You're good. You just now said one of the rocks, actually, the fear of losing, right? The fear of losing somebody. One of the things that was really cool, though, that I came across was not wanting to be too difficult. And for women in general, the culture, just the conditioning that we have to be, accommodating and agreeable. And, that even when it's at our own expense, the expense of our own well-being, like, we have to be just giving, right? To avoid losing. You want to comment on that? Because you had said something earlier.
Yeah,
that was
about Black women. And I think that women, we have a really, really hard time setting boundaries and saying no. And I think it's because we have this, this superhero complex where we are like, oh, we can fix everything. We can take care of everyone. And I think people get used to that too. And so when we say no, it's like, what do you mean no?
Yeah. I mean, and it's crazy because back to the next part of being conditioned to accept that toxic behavior is it's the same thing for me. It's a family dynamic of nobody says no. I mean, even to this day, if somebody needs something or wants something, like we don't say no. We just have to figure out how to get it done. And if we need to say no, I don't even know. I mean, I don't know that we really say no. So again, the trauma and the past experiences, clearly they influence, our ability to enforce these boundaries, right? But what can we do? Like, how do we step over that to, I'm kicking the rocks out of the road, but this one is just here. Like, I don't know. My whole family does it. Like, we're just nice people.
Yeah.
We're too nice. What do we do with that?
Yeah, I think it also comes with self-talk and changing the way that you talk to yourself when you say no or when somebody says no to you. And self-talk is a big part of that battle. So the way that you are, internalizing the way that this person is setting a boundary with you, or when you are setting a boundary with somebody else, you kind of just want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And sometimes saying no is taking care of yourself. And it can be hard. So I think it comes with repetition. You're going to feel guilty when you do it. And it's okay that you feel guilty when you do it. It's just doing it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, because obviously my past has completely influenced how I approach relationships, and sometimes in ways that I don't even recognize. Like, these are the things that I know. But then there are the weeds, and those are beliefs that, they keep us bound in these unhealthy patterns. And these are the thoughts that just kind of sneak in and strangle any effort we make to break free. And it's like when you're like, oh, maybe I'm overreacting, or, if I set another boundary, they might give up on us, right? Us. Or I can fix this if I just love them a little bit harder or love her a little bit harder. And then the big one, relationships require sacrifice. So I got to give them this one, like a give and take. Tell me how therapy really helps with kind of breaking us out of these toxic behaviors, breaking the cycle. Like, what happens when I come to therapy? What if I come to therapy with my partner? Like, how does therapy actually help us get out of this?
Yeah. So starting with the individual therapy, I think that therapy is a really great support because your therapist has your best interest at heart. So they care about your physical, emotional safety. So they can help you recognize patterns, whether that's behavioral patterns or reactions that you might have that they notice, or that your partner might be having that they might notice. So it can help you start to see those patterns, say, oh, this has happened, more than once, and it has happened in the same way. And I felt the same way every single time. It helps with the pattern. And then therapy can help you figure out what your values are and consider if the person that you are with is meeting those values. It can help you recognize your emotions and, like I said, body sensations, because you want to be able to trust how you're feeling in your body, that when you are feeling these things, they're probably a sign that there's something going on with you, and how to attune to that and take care of that. It also helps you trust yourself. So I think that's from like an individual context. If it was a couple session, I would say that it's kind of similarly, it could help you point out behaviors that you're doing and reactions that you're having, the patterns that your partner is having. And then you guys talk about that together with the therapist. And you guys can like figure out solutions, or if there is a solution to what you're wanting in your relationship.
Girl, I need to sign back up. I need to be in somebody's chair. Oh, right. It's not just about recognizing the patterns, but are you going to take action? Is there action to take? Like, are we going to keep doing this or no?
Right.
Okay. So please give us the anonymous tea once again on someone who overlooked red flags because they really truly feared losing the relationship. And what were the consequences? And I guess, how could they have, like, how could boundaries have kind of changed the outcome of this situation?
Yeah. So I think this comes to mind for a lot of clients, but I had one client in particular who was trying to hold on to a friendship, and the friendship was very, without better word to use, toxic. And so this friend wasn't being a very good friend on a regular basis, but my client was very scared to set boundaries because she was in fear. Yeah. She was like, I wonder if this person will still be my friend anymore. Or maybe they're going to take it as me being mean to them, or I'm just like scared to say something. And I think the longer that you hold on in those types of relationships where you're not getting your needs met, but you're also being harmed, more harm is more likely to be done. So whether that's emotional harm, or if you're in a abusive relationship, could be physical harm as well. And so the longer you stay there, the more harm can be done to you. So maybe you are, you just go further in a hole of self-doubt. You go further in this hole of not feeling good about yourself. Your self-worth goes down, and you start to kind of ignore those red flags because of fear of losing relationships. So more harm ends up being done. And so you start to tell yourself lies. Maybe you're like, okay, how do I tolerate this relationship? Maybe it's not that bad. Maybe it was actually my fault. You make excuses for the person rather than making an external and saying this was what that person did and I need to take space. So I think if in my client's case, if she would have set boundaries, I think she found that later on when she did set boundaries, it was actually welcomed by the friend. And the friend was like, wow, I never knew that you felt that way. And I think that sometimes the best case scenario, that's what happens, is that people are like, I didn't know I was hurting you when I was doing this thing. Let me stop doing that thing. Hope for that in well-meaning relationships.
Yeah, I mean, that was a very good ending. See, so people, there's hope.
There's hope. It works
There's hope. And it's also a huge reminder of why boundaries are important, right? It's not just about protecting ourselves. It's about just, creating the space for the mutual, healthy relationships to come into play, and making sure that God is even in there to be able to step in and just say, this is how it should be, right? So, one thing I want us all to kind of recognize is that setting boundaries is not like a one-time event. It's something that, takes time, and you have to put it in play more than once, right? Over time. And it takes courage and a whole lot of grace, right? Yep. But it can happen. And like you just now said, it could easily be, as soon as you say it, someone else is right there with you, And if, you get stronger, the more you move forward, right? So the next kind of area I wanted to get into is finally the good soil, because we've been talking a lot about how we get caught up with the roads, the rocks, the weeds, right? So tell me something good about this, like a healthy boundaries. Like, what do they truly look like? Because there's a significant difference between putting up walls and putting up boundaries. Right. I'm a waller.
Actually, there's a good article that's on this app. I actually happen to be featured in it. But it's Wondermind, and it's called, I think it's just,
look, you see me getting my pen.
It's by Wondermind, which is Selena Gomez's mental health company. And so the article, I think it's just called Setting Boundaries. And if you just search Setting Boundaries in Wondermind, it should come up too. But one thing that we talked about in the article was that setting boundaries is a process. You're going to be doing it for a while. You might find success with doing it. You might find that it's harder than you think that it is. You kind of want to be patient with yourself. You also don't want to be too rigid at the same time either. So you can be what they call in the article a brick wall. So if you're putting up too many boundaries and nobody can actually reach you, then maybe what you're not doing is engaging in relationship. You are just creating space from relationship.
Yeah, because I'm definitely a waller. I mean, it's like, it's no gray area for me. I say this a lot. It's like black or white. Either we're there or we're not.
Right.
I mean, that's just how, I don't know. It's easier, I think. Right. So, I am definitely growing in the sense of, trying to not put up the
Right.
wall. I mean, but I guess I also kind of look at as I'm growing and trying to learn it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's like when we set boundaries, we have to say, okay, this is where I end and where you begin. I can take it up to here, but anything outside of this, you got to work on that. Is that a good way to look at it? Like in terms of just setting the limit. Like that's what it is. And in terms of the communication piece, because how difficult is it to actually set the boundary? Like, how do you communicate? Because I think that's really important to make sure that we get that part in there.
So I think for when you are thinking about setting boundaries, I think one of your questions was, how do you set boundaries without guilt? And I would say that it might feel almost impossible to do it without guilt, especially in the beginning. And I am one of those therapists that are like, all of our feelings are normal. It's totally okay to feel all of those feelings. And so it makes sense that you might, nervous about setting a boundary. Well, it's a little intimidating. So, and you might also feel guilty. But again, like I said earlier, just because you feel guilty does not mean that you actually are guilty. So you want to make clear to yourself that you're not doing a bad thing by choosing yourself. And it's a normal human reaction to feeling like you're disappointing somebody is to feel guilty. So it's okay if you have to push through it and do it anyway. But I think, like you said, practicing setting boundaries on a regular basis is so important, because if you're setting boundaries on a regular basis, you're more likely to feel more comfortable setting the boundaries. So it is about practice. And for some clients, I found that thinking about setting the boundary is also just anxiety invoking. So we'll have where we'll talk about, I'll say, I'll be the person that you want to set a boundary with, and you be yourself. And so we'll practice in that way. And they're like, whoa, even just thinking about saying this out loud to you, I feel nervous. I feel all these things in my body. And so I think just even practicing saying it out loud, whether you have to say it in the mirror, whether you have to say it to a friend, practice, say the words, and then it can get easier over time. But it's definitely, you're going to have an emotional process, and that's just part of what comes with it.
People call me and ask for advice. I'd be like, girl, pray. Pray, and Psalm, I have a Psalm for that. Not this Psalm, but the other Psalm, chapter 141, verse 3 in the NIV, really plain and clear. Set a guard over your mouth and keep watch over the door of your lips. I mean, it's a Psalm, so you're actually like praying it to God to help you do this, right? And I feel like, a lot of times, as we all know, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Delivery is key. And, we have to make sure that we are communicating wisely, right? Especially when people challenge our boundaries, because they're challenging us. So you have to make sure that you are very clear. They understand exactly what it is that you're trying to say, what the problem is, and how you want them to fix it. But there are some tools and some strategies on how to communicate. And I know there's like some I statements or something. So can you kind of expand on that for us? Because I don't want to get that part
You
wrong.
definitely can do the I statements, just like, I'm feeling this way. And you kind of want to, you don't want to necessarily make it about the other person's behavior either. So you're just saying, this is what I'm going to do in response to whatever you end up doing. I can't change your behavior, but this is what I'm going to end up doing if you act this way. So you want to be assertive. You want to say what you need. You want to convey what you're going to get from this boundary being set. Like, maybe I will feel closer to you. Maybe I will feel safer with you. And you want to appear confident. So whether that is, fake it till you make it, pretend you're Beyonce for 5 minutes, but you can have this conversation and you're doing it right.
Yes. I mean, and I get that, because one of the things we were talking about last week, Tanisha, just being the gift as well. I mean, whether it's an intimate relationship or a friendly relationship, like ultimately your words should not hurt, right? Your words, even though you're being aggressive and affirmative, like you still have to be the gift. And whatever your words are, they should be uplifting. They should be encouraging. So, I feel this way when you do blank, and, it's it's one of those things where I just, again, the nicety in me, right? Like, it's like, I don't want to be mean, but sometimes when someone's challenging you, they push you to the limit, or you hold your own emotions in until you get to the limit and then you're snapping, and that is not going to work for anyone, right? So there is, of course, Proverbs 15:1. A gentle answer turns away wrath. Okay. But a harsh word stirs up anger. So it's like the harsher, the more rigid you are, that's what you're going to get in return. Right. So we want to kind of avoid that when we can.
Right. Yeah. You want to try to avoid that
So
where you can. You want to create the best environment possible for your need to be met.
yeah,
So it's not about like buttering the other person up, but it's about like, I want to give
exactly.
this to you how I would want to receive it. And so
That
if you were
part.
saying that to me, then I would want to receive it in this way. So I'm being conscious of the way that I'm giving this to you.
Exactly. I mean, just the mutual respect, right? We just want to make sure that we are both giving, what we want to receive back. And so the next part is when people just disrespect you anyways, right? And they still cross the, I'm not going to sit up here in front. I've been on both ends where, someone has set a boundary or I have set a, and either they was just like, they want to try, but they still violate it. Or I was like, okay, I'm good. And then I still violate it. How many chances? I mean, the Bible says, 70. I'm like, I don't know about that in our culture and society today, if that really works. Because, you still have to be prudent. You still got to be wise.
Right.
You don't let somebody keep laughing you. You know what I mean? They say, turn out, I give you 3 times, like the Bible say, but after that, come on now.
Yeah, we don't want
Doing
whiplash.
too much.
We don't want whiplash.
Yeah. And so, when it's time to walk away, that's the next, like, how do you walk away when it's really time to walk away? Like, is it just deuces, or is it like some type of gradual release? I mean, what stage?
I think that it depends on the person and it depends on the relationship. And I think it depends on the amount of harm that's being done in the relationship. If there's a lot of harm being done, I would say that sooner the better. But I think if it's not as much harm and you're trying to figure things out, or you're wanting to see if setting boundaries can work, then you can give it a little bit of a gradual time and then see what happens when you try setting a boundary with the person. So when somebody crosses a boundary, you want to let them know that they crossed a boundary, because maybe for some reason they don't know that they crossed your boundary. We all grow up differently. We all have different standards of what we think is appropriate. So you want to let somebody know that what they did was harmful in case they're unaware. And then, you tell them what you want going forward. So going forward, if this is what happens, this is what I would like to happen. I don't want you to do this to me again. So if you do this, this is what I'm going to do. And then listen to their reaction, because sometimes people's reactions to your boundaries will show you if they are a good person for you or not. So you want to hear their reaction, and you want to see if they, can sustain holding your boundary and also still being in relationship with you. And if they can't, then you have to reevaluate the relationship.
And I love that you said, like, everyone is raised differently, right? So you have that, even sometimes it's like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to violate, but they think, oh, this is just one more time. You know what I mean? It's not going to be the end of everything, because, or like you said, a guy will keep pushing you to the limit, keep pushing you. And then it's like, okay, how much more am I supposed to take of it? I guess the sooner, it's time to walk away, the better, because, in our 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I say 70s because my grandmom I literally just laid my grandmom to rest, okay? Let me tell you, 102 years old.
Wow, what a life.
Life keeps living. Life keeps living, So people think, oh, this doesn't happen to people in their 60s or their 70s. Oh, it does.
Oh, yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
And so it's like the sooner you can, cut that, the better, because, I mean, even at 85, God might have something way better in store for you.
Yeah.
You're like, but I've been with this guy for so long, or I've been with this woman for so long. I'm just going to keep dealing with it. Listen, my grandfather died probably about 15 years ago. Grandma was living. She was living these. And I feel like people are like, they don't want to leave because it's like, did I just waste all of this time? Is this, is that? And it's like, you can't even look at it that way because again, like it's just so much more that's more than likely in store. So what do you say to those people? Or that they have wasted their time and that they don't want to leave, like that time piece where it's just like they're holding on because that's one of the things that I hear, like, oh, I invested so much time, and it's like, what do you say to that? Because, okay, it's, you don't want to be considerate of their feelings, but it's like, how much more time
it's like you said, you want to be considerate of their feelings. So you want to be able to say that, like, that feels very hard. I'm sorry that you feel that way, letting them know that it's okay that they feel that way. And because it's not a but. And at the same time, can you live X amount of more years living the same way that you've just lived if nothing changed? I think it's important to think about.
And with that being said, how do they, like when they stop, when they break, when they go, how do they start to rebuild that self-worth after you break out of this whole, however many days, months, years that it's been, the rebuild? How does that?
Well, therapy is a great avenue to help you come to these understandings, but without therapy, I think a big part, like I keep talking about, is self-talk. So it's not the way that you're talking to yourself. So if you are believing that things aren't going to work out for you, that, that you've spent so much time in a relationship and nobody's going to want you or anything like that, those you're that take over your mind. So you want to notice how you're talking to yourself. You want to be kind to yourself, even in moments where you're holding yourself accountable. You can be like, dang, I wish I didn't do that. And in the future, I'm going to do differently, but you don't want to berate yourself. You don't want to treat yourself badly out of response of thinking that you did something that you shouldn't have. And I would also say, like, create opportunities to learn to trust yourself again. So that could be the smallest amount of things. It could just be like, I told myself I was going to wake up and do this thing. Am I going to wake up and do this thing? Yes, I did wake up and do the thing. That means that I can trust myself to do what I said that I'm going to do. And it's to relationships. If I myself that I do what I'm going to say that I'm going to do, then I trust myself to keep myself safe. And so it relates outwardly. If you talk to yourself kindly, you're not going to tolerate somebody talking to you unkindly. And also keep your friends around you, keep your village around you. They will affirm you. They'll help you feel better. They'll remind you that you're a great person. And you can lean on them to talk about relationships. So I think it's important to think about all of those things when you think about how to rebuild self-worth, and just know that it takes time. It's going to take a while, and that's okay. It's normal.
Yeah. And I mean, technically it's a journey, but it's one worth taking, right? And part of that journey is going to involve other people, and just making sure, like you said, your village is there and you're ready to take it on. Like, I mean, one of the things I always tell people is, someone like, oh girl, you need to leave. No, you need to take your time and decide when it's best for you to do what you need to do. I mean, yes, we do like to lean on people and listen, and everyone has their own ideas, but you then do still need to reconvene with God, your higher power, and make sure that it makes sense. I wanted to leave people with a couple of questions, okay? Just to kind of reflect on, because one is, first and foremost, even though we have our friends, we're never alone, right? God is always, and you just got to call on him and he is there, and I know some people are like, well, where is he? But, sometimes we get so emotionally drained that we can't look past our hands sometimes. So you got to go into that closet or wherever it is that you go and just get there, right? So, but I wanted to leave with these 3 questions for anyone that might be doing like a journal along. One of the first things is like, just think about what are 3 non-negotiable, boundaries that you need to set in your own relationship. Like what for you, not standards, not this or, but what are 3 boundaries that you need to have set in place? Also, think about or reflect on what red flags that you have let slide in the past, right? Not saying it won't happen again, but just you're kind of cognizant. Once you write it down and you kind of see, and maybe even write down the consequences of those red flags, you'll be like, okay, let me not. And then the third thing is start practicing, just like you said, like practice the conversation. Practice the conversation with yourself. Like you said, the self-talk, give yourself whatever it is that you need to give in that mirror, that I told you my therapist told me to do. And I was like, girl, what? What? But, I just feel like those 3 things, those 3 questions, if you can just kind of sit down and reflect on that. And I saw you had posted this in one of your stories. You were like, sit with that. What does that really mean? So I'm going to say, I want you to sit with that and pray over it and ask God for clarity and courage. And then I'm going to ask you, Psalm, what does that mean? Sit with it. Tell me.
I think there are a lot of ways to sit with it, but I think one of the main things is recognizing what's happening in your body. Your body really is where we're feeling our feelings. So
and what do you call that? Is there a term for that?
A term for what's happening in our body? Somatics?
Okay, I'm like, is it like physiological? Is something, right? Like, what do
you can have physical manifestations of how you're mentally feeling, and that's just somatic. So those are somatic symptoms. Somatic. So, like when you have anxiety and you have a stomach ache or your palms are all those things, you want to pay attention to how you feel in your body. And also one thing I really like to do with a lot of my clients, I'll just tell them to Google search feelings wheel, and I have them pinpoint a feeling that they're feeling. So I think sometimes, even if you don't know where you're at with things, if you can just go through looking at the wheel and just write down a bunch of emotions, you'll figure out how you're feeling.
Okay. That's how we sit with it. I love it. I love this episode. So listen, let me tell y'all, all the things must come to an end. And this was really good. Y'all don't even understand. I love you, Psalm. I just met this lady like today. And I love you. I mean that. Like, she's so patient. And she's just awesome. So, I mean, I guess a couple of things we just want to do our little quick takeaways. One, what you just now said, recognize the pattern and take action, right? Recognize it, take the action. Set these firm but kind, right? Boundaries, got to be nice, be the gift, okay? And most importantly, trust God and yourself. Your body is going to tell you somatics, okay? Your body is going to tell you if something isn't right, fix it. Don't sit up here making yourself sick.
Right.
Don't sit up here making yourself sick, and it's not worth it. So before we leave, Psalm, I do want the biggest lesson that you've learned and just doing therapy in terms of boundaries and just the biggest lesson that you can take from your last 10 years of practicing.
I would say the biggest lesson is that it's really hard to set boundaries. And I think that that's from me thinking about it as a therapist, but also as a client as well. So having to actually set boundaries in my own life is like, crap, I got to do what I tell my clients they got to do. And so, I kind of I think about the fact that, boundaries are hard to set. It's going to be hard to do it. You're going to feel it in your body. But I think it's worth it in the end. Usually I've seen for a lot of people that they're really proud of the fact that they were able to set boundaries. And it makes them more likely to want to do it again. So I think if you could just try it and just make it an experiment and just see what happens, you might be more surprised than you think. People might actually be okay with you setting boundaries.
I like that. I like that takeaway. And it's funny you said that, you have to do it yourself, right? It's so funny how much I learned from doing the podcast. I'm like, this was for me, but it's not. It's for y'all, but it's me. you learn so much. So does that happen with you in therapy? Like as you're teaching other people, you're like, okay, yeah, notes.
Yes.
I love that. All right. And I always ask before one word to sum up. I mean, if you had to pick from today's conversation, just in terms of, avoiding narcissistic behavior, of, not ignoring red flags, and of course, just setting the boundaries, like one word that we could take from this and just kind of hold on to it for the next couple of days, anyways.
I would just go with trust, maybe self-trust. I guess that's technically 2 words, but trust yourself. And I think if you can trust yourself, you'll figure out what you need to do for yourself. You'll take care of yourself. You'll keep yourself safe.
I love it. So it's funny because Kanisha gave us the same word last week.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, no, that's my thing. I said, I'm not telling anybody what the other word is. So, but it's funny. She gave us trust last week. So listen, we still trust it. Trust in yourself, trust in God. We are trusting. Y'all. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me, Psalm. Everybody out in the audience, thank you for hanging out with us. I truly, truly appreciate it. I do want you all to take the time to just reflect on your boundary setting journey, right? Increase it if necessary. If you want to connect with Psalm McDaniels, you can find her on Instagram. Y'all, my Philly Jones gonna love this. Her name is @thattherapist. And if you don't know how to spell that, I'm going to try. ThatTherapistJawn.
Yes.
Hey. Better than they can spell Eagles, right? Remember the man was messing up?
That was so bad.
But then after she did this, she corrects her, forget who he was, but he messed up. I said, you know what? Well, they're not talking about us. I'm not even going to do it right now. I did it last time. I'm not doing it no more. Okay? Y'all, please do not forget to subscribe to Rose, Rocks, Weeds, and Soil on YouTube, of course, and wherever else you watch us. Next week, y'all, we're going to be finishing up this series with Faith That's the Fire, and we're going to dig into the good soil of forgiveness and freedom. All right. So in the meantime, I love you all. You know I mean it. Please, please, please follow us on IG also, RRWS Podcast. All right. I love y'all. Thank you so much, Psalm.
Thank you.
Until next time, because we are going to see each other eventually in person. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you. You are so beautiful. Thank you so much. All right, y'all. Love y'all. Mean it. Bye.